Welcome back, everybody. We are here for the Victory Road VGC Spring Series semi-finals this time. So we've got through top 16, top 8, and these players have been playing so well going out into this, and now we're going into what could be their penultimate battle before winning in the final. But before that, we've got Kyle Geffner and Francesco Deiana as well, with some interesting teams. Some of you who've tuned in before might have seen them battling out in the previous stages as well. But first of all, welcome back to Mr. Jamie Boyd, back in the chair. How are you feeling, sir?
Yeah, feeling very good. So we're finally down to just 4 players left in this tournament. We can have a look at their journey through at least the top 8 here, going through the quarterfinals, seeing who was able to advance. And you can see here that we are going to be featuring Kyle and Francesco in this first round of the semi-finals, as they were able to advance. And then on the other side of the bracket, it will be Marco Silva and Simone Sanvito. So 2 international champions on one side. That's going to be a very interesting match to look at as well. But also going to be very interesting to see Kyle versus Francesco as well in our first round of the semi-final.
Absolutely. And let's see who those players are going into this excellent match, because they've got a lot of experience behind them, and we've seen Kyle as well in the previous series as well doing very well, getting I think at least to the top 8 as well with a very strong team. So to see him again here is quite exciting, and he must be feeling the pressure and knowing he's good enough to get to this stage in such a big tournament multiple times. He really must want that win. But Francesco Deiana as well, with his Sun team as well, and an interesting Mamoswine set as well, which I'm yet to see myself. I am very excited for this match.
Yeah, definitely going to be an exciting one, and we can have a look at the players now, see their teams and their accomplishments once again. So we can start off with Kyle here, rocking that Azumarill, and I'm very happy to see that Pokemon be brought into the semi-final at this point as well. So a very, very interesting pick there, but really putting in the work to bring him up to this top 4. And you can see his accomplishments there. Champion of one of the spring qualifiers, as well as getting the top 4 in the Winter Series finale. So he's matched that top 4 once again, but definitely wants to be going further into this Spring Series as well. So that's going to be Francesco bit between him and the finals at this stage.
And we got Francesco Deiana as well. So we've got the Umbreon, Regieleki, Venusaur, Torkoal, Charizard, and Mamoswine team here. And again, a lot of accomplishments here too. The spring qualifier, top 4, top 32 in the number 5 one as well. Number 1 spring qualifier, he got top 32. And in the Players' Cup 1 as well, he got top 25 in the Europe, which is an excellent performance as well, with something it captures the entire globe of Pokemon into that as well. So 2 very accomplished players, and I bet they know exactly how to run their teams. They've had a little bit of time to prep for each other as well during the break between the other Top Cup matches. So they may have already thought of what they're going to lead, but here are the teams in front of us with those items.
Yeah, you always have to know what your matchup is going into the Sun team, but it's very uncommon to see a Mamoswine on there. It's a really cool pick from Francesco to mix things up. On Kyle's side of the field, Landorus and Moltres do tend to be very good answers to Sun, but Mamoswine's a very good answer to them.
It is, and it's running the Assault Vest with a little bit of bulk in it as well. But thanks to its Oblivious, it's not going to be affected by Intimidate, which is quite key versus Carl's team, because he's got both the Incineroar and the Landorus, which can intimidate it. But this Mamoswine is not going to be having any of it, and it's got a lot of offense power versus pretty much the entire team. It's got Ice for Amoonguss and Landorus and Moltres. It's just about the Azumarill that doesn't hit for super effective, but it still can do a lot of damage. But in terms of like the overall game plans here, it seems like Francesco's got a lot of options that he can work with in terms of his Dynamax options, and on Kyle's end he's got a little more obvious support options in that Incineroar and the Amoonguss, but he's also got a few Dynamax options of his own in that Moltres that we see do so well in that top 8 match. So I think there's no obvious lead for me here, I'd say. So let's see what the players have come up with.
Well, we're going to see that Mamoswine once again. It's been putting in a lot of work for Francesco here, so going to be leading that alongside the Venusaur, and we're going to be seeing that Regieleki and Incineroar coming out from Kyle's side.
We are. So there's the Intimidate that goes off. That should not be affecting that Mamoswine. So if I'm Mamoswine, I'm pretty happy at this point. It's in a position to take some knockouts if necessary. So, because Regieleki is focus sash, so it might not go down to one hit. No, apologies. So it's choice specs on Kyle's end, so it does go down to one hit. So I think the ball is definitely Francesco's court. See what he decides to do here, because Oblivious does not prevent you from being faked out, unlike Inner Focus, so it still could be faked out. So does Francesco want to go for his Dynamax right now? But I imagine Carl might be thinking as to how to maybe play a bit more defensively here. We may see a switch out from the Incineroar into the Moltres, but Francesco is the first to go for a switch, and it's that Venusaur into Torkoal.
Going to be setting up the sun here, so if that Incineroar is going on the offensive to try and do some big damage to that Mamoswine, it's just being powered up by that Torkoal, and it is going to be a Dynamax coming out straight away, and that does look like it is from Francesco's side. So once again, we are going to be seeing a Dynamax Mamoswine.
Yes, we are. It's going pretty big, which means it may be able to survive a Flare Blitz from this Incineroar, depending on how much investment both these players have in bulk versus attack. But I imagine we may see a Max Quake coming out right now, but there's the fake out, and that is a disappointing one for Kyle.
Hey, you never want to be faking out a Dynamax Pokemon. Volt Switch does so much damage to that Torkoal, though. It is going to be bringing it down into that berry range, munching away on its Citrus Berry, and allowing that Regieleki to pivot itself back out, maybe into something that is off the ground, like that Landorus or that Moltres, if the Max Quake would have been targeted into that Regieleki. But the Incineroar did stay in here. If the Max Quake was decided to go into that Incineroar slot, that would be picking up the knockout at this point, because the Intimidate wasn't able to affect it. So Carl's definitely really thinking about his positioning here.
Yeah, I can imagine. He's thinking, Mamoswine's getting to get off a huge attack, whatever it is, because another play Francesco could go for the Hailstorm, say, into the Regieleki as well, which would probably pick up the knockout anyway, because Regieleki is just so frail. And with Hail Chip to take something else out as well, maybe reset the weather so the Incineroar doesn't do as much flare blitz damage, even though the Torkoal's coming in. And it's going to hit pretty much everything in the back for a lot of damage, because the Incineroar's already on the field. It's only the Azumarill that could come in and take that. But here comes the Landorus.
And that would not be wanting to switch into a Hailstorm at all. And once again, the Oblivious coming into play for the Mamoswine, not going to be affected by that Intimidate, but it is a Max Quake, and it is into the Incineroar slot. So that is going to be doing a huge amount of damage and picking up the clean KO on that Incineroar. So a really, really strong start for Francesco, being able to take out the Incineroar. All it was able to do was just fake out a Dynamax Pokemon and then faint here. So really, really strong Max Quake into the face of that potential Landorus switch-in, but able to get that knockout.
Yeah, brilliant. He just plays it straight down the line. He just, what's the main threat to Mamoswine? Incineroar. I'm going to take it out. And that's simple as that. I think Kyle maybe read a bit too much into that turn, because I guess on Kyle's end, he has two options to switch into a Max Quake between that Moltres and that Landorus. So, but Francesco just goes for it, I think, and he doesn't lose out too much. He uses a Dynamax turn if the flying type does come in there, but he's still not getting threatened by that Regieleki one bit instead. So, but a lot of damage onto that Torkoal there thanks to that Specs Regieleki. So, although it doesn't quite go down to that Volt Switch, but would have to a Thunderbolt, which would have been quite scary. But so Kyle now is much more repositioned here. He still has his Dynamax to go with, but in terms of that Azumarill, which is really interesting that I haven't seen in so long, it is that Belly Drum set, but there isn't any fake out. There's no Rage Powder to help it out here, so we may see an instant Dynamax at this point to just maybe reset the weather and get a lot of damage onto this Azumarill.
Well, the resetting the weather won't be affecting too much if the Torkoal is going to be switching out here. If the Azumarill does go for the Dynamax, it will be overwritten once again as the Torkoal switches back in. But no Dynamax here. The Landorus did switch out into that Regieleki, which is going to be taking that Max Hailstorm, and is enough for the KO on that Regieleki. But the Azumarill was left on its own here, and it did not go for that Dynamax. And we do know it is carrying the Belly Drum as a way of setting up itself. And it looks like that is what it is going for here. It is going to be cutting its HP in half down to its Citrus Berry range, so going to be able to eat away on that berry, but most importantly maximize its attack here all the way to +6 stages of increased attack.
Oh my goodness, yeah. So Kyle does get away with that belly drum, but Francesco does cover for that option and gets his Venusaur in, which is going to be quite crucial to prevent it doing too much. But Kyle does have the Aqua Jet on it, so he is able to get off attack up before Venusaur goes for a Frenzy Plant. I'm actually still on the back foot because this Mamoswine has attacked twice, gotten 2 KOs, and has another turn to get possibly another KO on this Landorus. It's just going completely on the offensive here, and I think it's me on Carl to maybe make a bit of a play here, because Landorus does have Swords Dance, which means he does have access to Max Guard, which it could go for this turn. Question is, does a Dynamax Azumarill survive a Frenzy Plant from Venusaur? I'm not too sure, to be honest, because that's what Venusaur does have here. So Francesco can kind of play this straight down the line at this point. He's got all the resources, and Carl's definitely on the back foot, but can he bring it back with this +6 Azumarill?
Yeah, it's an interesting choice for Francesco here. Going to be switching out that Dynamax Mamoswine here in favor of the Torkoal. So going to be overwriting the Hail, getting that Sun back up, decreasing the power of those water moves that could come out from that Azumarill, and crucially going to be putting that Venusaur faster than the Landorus thanks to the Chlorophyll ability. And it's going to be a Dynamax coming out from Kyle's side here, and it could possibly be that Landorus to try and get some airstreams going, but it is in fact going to be that Azumarill going to try and make use of that +6 stages of increased attack here, but is going to be staring down that Venusaur, and that means that the Landorus would have to go for a fly to attack the Venusaur, but that wouldn't be able to affect it first. But because of the increased stages of speed thanks to that Chlorophyll, the Frenzy Plant is able to go off into the Azumarill, but not enough to pick up the KO. So the fly is able to go off from the Landorus, and the Max Geyser is going to be coming out from the Azumarill into the Venusaur slot. And thanks to the Sun being set up, even though that Azumarill is at the maximum stages of increased attack, not enough to pick up the KO on that Venusaur. But the Venusaur now will not be able to move this turn, and that Torkoal is definitely threatened down by this +6 Azumarill in the rain.
Exactly, yeah. Kyle's definitely in the driver's seat this turn. Venusaur's got a recharge. Torkoal's very slow. And even if the Mamoswine stayed in, it's still like Kyle's play there. He goes for the fly to kind of as a pseudo protect to get around this potential Landorus hit, and ends up getting a Max Geyser into the Venusaur. Doesn't pick up a KO, but it does reset the rain, and the Torkoal is stuck in here this time, so it's going to have to switch out if it wants to reset, but the fly comes down into this Venusaur.
And it is going to activate that Cobra Berry as well, but it's still such a strong attack, and the Venusaur has taken so much damage from that Max Geyser. Even with the Cobra Berry, it is definitely enough to pick up the KO, and this Torkoal didn't go for a protect, but even if it did, I'm not sure if it would be able to survive this +6 Max Geyser in the rain into the Torkoal. That's probably KO'd about 4 Torkoals with that one attack, so going to be able to take out Venusaur and Torkoal in the same turn here. So we're going to have the Mamoswine waiting in the back for Francesco and his final Pokemon, and we're going to have to see how he's going to be able to deal with this Azumarill.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see that how many Torkoals that was. I think I'm going to guess 8 just off the bat, because Azumarill is very strong with that huge power. But yeah, we've got the Mamoswine coming in here, and I believe one mystery Pokemon, that Umbreon indeed. So I guess if as long as this Mamoswine isn't in range of a Landorus attack, it's able to get off a safe move and just cover the Azumarill slot. Azumarill and Umbreon also have like similar speed stats. Umbreon's a bit naturally faster than Azumarill, so if the Azumarill has a bit of speed investment into it, it could outspeed the Umbreon, which meaning that Francesco has to allocate his Mamoswine slot to KO this Azumarill instead. But Landorus is a sitting duck at this point. It can't protect here, so it's probably a safe slot for the Mamoswine to target at this point. Azumarill then targets something, KOs it, but then gets KO'd back in return. But Azumarill's bulky, it's a fairy type. Can this Umbreon even get a KO in it?
Quite possibly, because Foul Play would be making use of that massive stages of increased attack at this point. But a Max Guard going to come out from the Azumarill, and an Earthquake going to be fired off from the Landorus, doing a lot of damage to both the Pokemon on Francesco's side. But Iron Head hits into the Max Guard, and Foul Play hits into the Max Guard of the Azumarill. So not the correct targeting there for Francesco. The Dynamax has gone from the Azumarill, and that gives it access to Aqua Jet once again. We know the Mamoswine does not carry Protect because it is that sort of best rarity. The Umbreon also does not carry Protect here, so you can just go for an Aqua Jet into either Pokemon, and in the rain, even an Umbreon as bulky is probably going to be in range.
Yeah, I think Carl's brought this back. I think he can go for that safe 100% accurate Earthquake and yeah, just take out Francesco's team, because as long as that Mamoswine goes down, then Landorus should be able to take on this Umbreon. So there goes the Umbreon.
Yeah, the +6 Aquajet being really strong and going to sacrifice his own Azumarill here to be able to pick up the KO on that Mamoswine with the Earthquake from the Landorus. So a really, really strong showing from that Azumarill coming out, making use of that Belly Drum, even though it's at such low HP, able to survive that Frenzy Plant and do so much damage to Francesco's side of the field.
Yeah, definitely not just for moral support, that Azumarill. I think going straight on the offensive with those huge attacks and getting that crucial survival from that Frenzy Plant too, but also at the same time as having a Torkoal come in that is slower than the Azumarill too. I think maybe Francesco was going a little bit too hard on the read there, switching out his Mamoswine, I'd say, so to get his Torkoal in, because he does. Yeah, he gets the sun up, but and it covers for the Landorus maybe going for an Airstream, but at that point, I think you needed the Mamoswine to use that final turn of its attacks to get off an attack that you know it can get off, because at that point the Azumarill hadn't got off its Belly Drum, so. Interesting play, and Kyle goes for that amazing protect, that max guard on the Azumarill at the end there to secure the win. So I imagine going into this game, Francesco might be thinking along similar lines. He knew how strong his Mamoswine was, and the main thing that threatens it on Kyle's end is that Azumarill, really, which kind of needs to set up before it can get going. But that's why I think Kyle will probably see that here again.
Yeah, that Azumarill being really crucial here, showing the main niche that it has over Primarina and Tapu Fini there. Belly Drum being able to increase its attack stats so much stronger than Calm Mind can, so you can really put on the offensive pressure immediately with that one setup, even though you have to sacrifice some of your HP to do it. So really, really strong showing there for Azumarill, and Mamoswine was definitely putting in the work, but Azumarill is definitely the answer to that Mamoswine. Even though you've got the sun set up with the Torkoal to reduce the damage output, we could see how much the damage output was reduced with that Max Geyser in the sun not being able to KO that Venusaur even at +6 stages of increased attack. But that Azumarill is definitely a massive threat, and the fact that it could survive that Frenzy Plant makes it even more threatening.
Absolutely. I wonder even if Kyle had actually calced that as well, knowing that once he's Dynamax, he can actually live that huge attack for Venusaur. But we do see the same lead from Francesco coming out here, but a very different lead coming out from Kyle this time. Very much on the slower play this end, and I quite like it.
Yeah, going to be leading with Incineroar and Amoonguss, so a very, very slow and passive lead for Kyle here. You have access to Fake Out, you have access to Spore, so you can try and put a stop to one of the Pokemon on the opponent's side of the field while you put the other one to sleep. But both Pokemon on Francesco's side of the field probably want to Dynamax here, so it is a bit awkward.
It is, but Kyle's in a nice position here because he's got that safety goggles on his Incineroar, so Venusaur can't put the Incineroar to sleep. There's no fake on Francesco's end, so either way at this point, Kyle can get something off versus this Mamoswine, whether that's a big fire type attack, a Spore, and the Mamoswine has to kind of pick which one it's going to take out, if any. And at that point, Kyle could then potentially get in his Azumarill maybe next to the Amoonguss, or with a parting shot from the Incineroar, he can pivot it back out and get a fake out turn coming in there, or even just going straight for the Dynamax when he can. But Regieleki has become in here, and the Dynamax is coming out from Francesco's Mamoswine.
Yep, so that Mamoswine going to be going for the Dynamax here once again. Going to have access to Max Hailstorm, so even though the Amoonguss has the Focus Sash, Max Hailstorm would be able to KO that Amoonguss on this turn thanks to the Hailstorm chip, but that would still leave the Mamoswine open to that Spore that could come out this turn. And the Incineroar does go for the Fake Out, and it does land into the Venusaur slot, so it wasn't able to go for any attacks to try and break that Focus Sash on the Amoonguss, but it is not going to be a Max Hailstorm, it is going to be a Max Quake to KO this Incineroar. Once again, a repeat of Game 1, knocking out that Incineroar with the Max Quake immediately, but that definitely leaves the Amoonguss open here to go for that Spore into the Mamoswine and cut short this Dynamax, and that is unfortunately going to be the end of that game, at least because of that disconnection. But you would expect the Spore to have gone into that Mamoswine. If you managed to predict the Venusaur switching out into the Regieleki, that would also put that to sleep, but you would expect that Mamoswine to be going to sleep that turn.
Yeah, I believe so. I think you would be spoiling the Venusaur slot, would you? So, especially as you covered it for the fake out. So, it basically guaranteed that the Venusaur couldn't attack as well as the Mamoswine, and therefore you couldn't take out the Amoonguss through its Focus Sash without that Hail Chip. But as you said, at the end of the turn. So, Mamoswine is able to get an attack off, but yeah, going to sleep at the end of that turn, and you'd have at least another turn to sleep through, and then you might be able to wake up in your last turn of Dynamax, but even then, it's unlikely. So I think that Carl had put himself in quite a good position there, but it was still definitely anybody's game because Incineroar does just drop like that, and that's a great answer to have versus something like a Venusaur. And your fake out's gone as well, so there's less support for Azumarill. So it could have definitely still been either player's game at that point, but we'll have to see what these players decide to do, whether they kind of repeat it and maybe do the just play the first turn as they played it before. But it would be interesting to see what they decide to do. But we can talk about how the adjustment that Carl made for that Incineroar Amoonguss versus what he brought last time, and like how effective it was versus a Mamoswine, especially countering that particular lead. And maybe Francesco could have thought about something a bit more different and probably didn't actually expect that lead coming from Kyle.
Yeah, and so as soon as you switch out the Venusaur there, it means that the Mamoswine is definitely going to sleep, because the Amoonguss does carry the Focus Sash. Even if you go for a Max Hailstorm to KO it through the Focus Sash after the Hail Chip at the end of the turn, the Spore is still guaranteed to go into the Mamoswine. So really against that lead, you have to Dynamax the Pokemon you think the Fake Out is going to go into, because then you can get that Dynamax Pokemon to attack the Amoonguss to break the Sash, and then the other one can follow up with a second attack. So as soon as you switch out the Venusaur, Mamoswine's going to sleep. So you do KO the Incineroar in that case, but then you sacrifice at least one turn of your Dynamax, and maybe both of them.
Yeah, exactly, which does put Francesco on the back foot there. But he still would have had Venusaur, and I'm guessing Torkoal in the back as well to kind of help out that Venusaur with its speed and especially versus that Azumarill, which can do a lot of damage with his water-type attacks. So I imagine that even with no Dynamax further from that Mamoswine, it still would have been quite an interesting game. And I think we'll probably still see it coming up later, I believe. I think they're going to restart and just repeat turn one and see how things go from there. Not sure whose disconnect it was. I think it's just going to be a repeat. So we're going to have that same turn one again. So I guess we can start to think maybe Francesco knows his Mamoswine's very likely going to sleep. What does he do from there? As soon as I think the Regieleki just switched in, and then Amoonguss is still sitting there, full health, Sash intact, but Mamoswine and the Regieleki both have a special defense boost. So Jamie, what do you think maybe Kyle's going to bring in from that Incineroar?
Well, with the Mamoswine going to sleep, you can bring in your Azumarill pretty safely and go for that Rage Powder Belly Drum. You could be taking an Electro Web from the Regieleki, but at least that wouldn't be a Thunderbolt or a Volt Switch at that point. So that is a potential route that Kyle could go for. We saw how effective the Belly Drum was in that game one. Even though the Azumarill was put on such low HP, it was still able to do so much damage because it was able to survive those attacks. So even though it would probably have to take an Electro Web, then it would still be most likely be able to set up with that Belly Drum and then can start going for those Aqua Jets. But then at the same time, you could just bring in a Pokemon that protects. You've got a Spore that can go into the Regieleki. You know you can't Dynamax with the Regieleki anymore, so you can't set up the Max Lightnings. So another Spore would be pretty guaranteed at that point, because Regieleki's not really threatening Amoonguss too much.
Yeah, some great points there. And I think as long as Carl brought that Azumarill, I think, as you said, it looks looking pretty good at that point. But just checking the item that Francesco has on his Regieleki, and it is that Focus Sash, and he does have the Electro Web as well, so he would be able to get off some damage versus the Azumarill, but not a huge amount. And as I don't think Azumarill wants to be outspeeding anything in particular, and I think even after one speed drop, it's still probably outspeeding the Torkoal potentially in the back. So that doesn't really change a lot. Although if you do go for the Dynamax on that Azumarill, you're obviously giving up your priority Aqua Jet. So that may give a potential Venusaur in the back for Francesco an interesting opportunity to go for another Frenzy Plant, especially if he can get enough damage on it with that Electro Web, to the point that when Azumarill goes to the Belly Drum and then eats its Citrus Berry and goes back up, it doesn't have as much health as it did last time and would be in range of that Frenzy Plant. Plus, Amoonguss can't redirect it. So we've still got an interesting position as long as that Venusaur can come back in for Francesco. But it just depends on what that fourth is for both players even.
Yeah, it could be still that Landorus that could come in as well. That would definitely be a good switch in if the Landorus was brought to the game in the face of the sleeping Mamoswine and the Regieleki, because you know you're not going to be taking any of those ice moves that turn, so you would be able to maybe just go for a Sword Stance at that point and the Spore into the Regieleki. But we're going to be getting back into this game, and we've seen what the turn 1 is going to be. We've seen it's going to be that Mamoswine and Venusaur and that Incineroar and Amoonguss, and we're going to get a sleeping Mamoswine very shortly.
Yeah, I think we do. So from this lead aspect, I think in general this lead from Francesco is quite nice, because especially when you lead the Venusaur, you have the option of switching in Torkoal potentially to boost Venusaur's speed, and you can go on the offensive that way, but also you could switch it in the other slot and help Mamoswine survive water type attacks with the sun being up as well. So in general I quite like this lead from Francesco, but I think Kyle obviously has found a really particular lead that kind of just beats this lead, specifically because he has the Focus Sash, Amoonguss, and that or less crucially the safety goal was on the Incineroar. But here we go, here's that Dynamax, Mamoswine, and the Regieleki coming in.
Yeah, so I'm going to be getting that Incineroar KO'd on this first turn as well, and the Regieleki switching in so that it can start to threaten down some of those Electro Webs if in case the Azumarill comes back in. But Mamoswine going to be able to pick up the knockout and then go to sleep here, so we'll have to see what the Pokemon waiting in the back for Kyle is, because it's going to be very crucial here. If it is that Landorus, then you are able to be threatening a lot against this Regieleki, and maybe even just get a very free Sword Stance at that point. But there goes the Incineroar, and then it's very crucial here what the Pokemon in the back is going to be for Kyle.
Yeah, it is. And one interesting thing as well, Kyle going for that fake out into the Regieleki also breaks its Focus Sash. It's not able to survive that one big turn either, so it's like it's got no item at this point unless it's going to somehow recover up to full HP. So yeah, Mamoswine does take a nap, and we're going to see what Kyle kind of brings in at this point. And if he does have that Azumarill, as you're saying, Jamie, then I think it's going to be quite a lot of offense going in for the following turn, and Francesco's going to have to think about how he's going to use that Venusaur. But no, we've got the Landorus actually coming in.
Yeah, so Landorus is going to be very good against this Regieleki here, and at least for one turn does not need to worry about that Mamoswine. So really it's a very free Sword Stance if the Landorus chooses to go for it. It won't be taking any damage this turn because the Mamoswine can't go for it and Regieleki can't touch it. So maybe the Landorus is going to be the sweeper for Kyle this game.
Potentially, yeah. Although one thing we've got to look out for is Francesco, if he does have that Torkoal as well in the back as well as his Venusaur, he still has the opportunity to go for a Sleep Powder into Landorus. So even his Dynamax might be up, Francesco may also be able to go for that same play and go for that Sleep Powder into Landorus, because I believe this Landorus is Life Orb and not actually like a Lumbear or anything. So it could take a nap unless Kyle's Landorus goes for maybe some max Airstream boost to get up that speed, so it actually outspeeds the Venusaur even within the sun, but it would likely need 2 boosts. But Regieleki does now switch out and Venusaur comes in.
Yes, so definitely wanting to be starting to put that pressure of the Sleep Powder onto that Landorus. So maybe switching in the Venusaur here so you can switch out your Mamoswine next turn to get that sun up. But Landorus is not going to be setting up here at all with those Sword Stances. Wants to go right on the offensive with the Dynamax instead. So maybe trying to get some of those speed boosts so it can start to put itself faster than that Venusaur, even if the sun were to go up here. And the Amoonguss did have a relatively free Spore into the Regieleki as well, but that max Airstream is going to target what was the Regieleki and is going to hit into that Venusaur, activating the Cobra Berry, but that does not matter at all. It is still going to easily pick up the knockout on that Venusaur, showing the power of that Life Orb on the Landorus. Even with the Resist Berry, it is still able to pick up the KO on that Venusaur.
Yeah, no attack boosts needed there, and especially as Francesco's team doesn't have any Intimidate either. This Landorus is fully charged with just its Life Orb alone. So, and as we see, I think Carl may have doubled up into that slot there with the Sludge Bomb and the Airstrip just to make sure it picked up that knockout, depending on how bulky the Venusaur is, because with a Cobra it may be able to survive it with enough, but as we see, it just goes down. And now the Regieleki comes in, which is not what you want versus a Landorus. So it looks like Carl is definitely much in the driver's seat here, and Mamoswine does take its final sleep turn.
Yeah, and Amoonguss still has its Focus Sash available, can still just go for that redirection at this point. If the Mamoswine doesn't wake up here, it won't be able to go for that Max Hailstorm into the Amoonguss to pick up the KO, and then there'll be another turn of redirection available for this Landorus to keep it safe. So the Landorus is definitely in a very strong position here. Whether it wants to target down the Regieleki or the Mamoswine, though, is up for Kyle to decide here.
Exactly, and he's still very much in the driver's seat here. I mean, Venusaur being the main threat to a potential Azumarill is completely down, and seeing that Torkoal there is probably good news as well for Kyle. He can safely target a Max Quake into that, assuming Francesco hasn't brought a Charizard randomly this game, but he goes for a safe Rage Powder just in case that Mamoswine wakes up.
So going to be redirecting any attacks that the Mamoswine could throw at it, but Max Quake very safe here into what was the Regieleki, but instead hitting the Torkoal, and is still able to pick up the KO at this point. So really Kyle just has to KO this Mamoswine now, and the Regieleki won't be able to beat this Landorus, but it's going to be very crucial if this Mamoswine is able to wake up here. Otherwise Amoonguss would be able to redirect once again for the next turn, and it does stay asleep. So that is another turn available for the Amoonguss to redirect one more ice type attack away from this Landorus, so it can get another max move off.
Yeah, that's a pretty huge turn there. And Regieleki comes in, so it will be able to move first before the Mamoswine to get an attack onto the Amoonguss, so that the Mamoswine can pick it up, but Mamoswine's going to be slower than this Landorus, especially after that Airstream boost. So, and it's lost its Dynamax, so it's lost its offense, and a Life Orb Landorus is nothing that you want to stand in front of. It's going to do a lot of damage, and I wouldn't be surprised if it actually takes the one-hit KO on this Mamoswine this turn, because once that's gone, Landorus has the game locked, because this Regieleki doesn't have anything but electric attacks here. So here comes this turn, protect from Regieleki.
From Regieleki may not even help at this point, even if a Max Quake went into that slot, because of how strong that Landorus is. But the Rage Powder coming out once again, keeping that Landorus safe in case it's not able to pick up the knockout with this maxed Airstream into this Mamoswine. But of course, we saw how strong it was. It was able to KO a Cobra Berry Venusaur. Even with that Resist Berry, it's still able to knock out this Mamoswine in one shot with that max Airstream. And now Kyle definitely has this game, as this Regieleki can no longer touch this Landorus.
No, absolutely not. So Carl's piloted this game very nicely indeed. I think, and Francesco gives him the hand as well, which is excellent. Yeah, there's nothing Regieleki can do here at this point. It just goes to show Kyle was. It was that Venusaur, I think, that was really key for Francesco to kind of pilot there and Kyle to get around, because it could sleep powder Landorus, and in the sun likely still sleep powder even with +1 speed, and it also has the Cobra Berry, which is perfect for if it Dynamaxed as well. And it was also key for the Azumarill because it only had Water and Fairy attacks, which doesn't do too much to Venusaur too. So maybe I would have liked to see Francesco maybe go down the Venusaur route potentially for this game, but I don't blame him going for the Mamoswine, and I'm not sure if I would have expected an Amoonguss Incineroar lead versus a Mamoswine that hits it both super effectively, but it's the fact that it can only target one, which was so key, and Incineroar's very useful moves.
Yeah, it was still a very good showing from the Mamoswine throughout this Spring Series Grand Finale, but unfortunately not able to advance Francesco into the final. It will be Kyle that is advancing, so top 4 in the Winter Series, and now has made the final, so will be contending for that championship, and we'll have to find out who is going to be joining him. We're going to be cutting to a short break, and we'll find out if it's going to be Marco or Simone joining Kyle in the final.